So I'm in my office yesterday working on some jokes about airline foods because apparently that's still a thing. And my phone buzzes with a text from one of my Washington contacts. All it said was, yeah, Melania talked. Everything's about to change. And I'm thinking, wait, what? Melania talked? She barely says 3 words in public and now she's giving testimony that's going to change everything? Well, it turns out that's exactly what happened. And what I learned over the next few hours was one of the most stunning political betrayals I've ever witnessed in my career covering this absolute circus we call American politics. Here's what we know. Melania Trump, the woman who stood by Donald through every scandal, every controversy, every late-night Twitter meltdown, has apparently given testimony that completely undermines his entire defense strategy. We're talking about the kind of insider information that can only come from someone who's been in the room for every private conversation, every strategy session, every moment when the cameras weren't rolling. And according to my sources, what she said isn't just damaging, but it's devastating. Now, before I get into the details, let me just say this. I've been married for a long time, and I know that when your spouse starts talking to investigators about your business dealings, your presidency isn't the only thing in trouble. Your marriage is basically over, too. The timing of this is absolutely remarkable. Just as Trump's inner circle was already starting to fracture, we're talking about cabinet members quietly discussing the 25th Amendment, Republican lawmakers distancing themselves from his policies, federal prosecutors being pressured to resign for not pursuing political investigations. Suddenly, the most protected source of information in the entire Trump operation decides to cooperate with investigators. It's like the ultimate inside job. The call is coming from inside the House, and the House is the White House. From what I'm hearing, Melania's testimony covers everything from the Antifa terrorist designation executive order to the pressure campaign against federal prosecutors. But here's the really explosive part. She apparently has firsthand knowledge of conversations where Trump explicitly discussed using presidential powers for personal political gain. And we're not talking about some low-level staffer with secondhand information or some disgruntled former employee with an axe to grind. This is the First Lady of the United States, someone who was present for private family conversations, someone who heard things that no congressional investigation or special prosecutor could ever access, and she decided to tell the truth about it. I keep trying to imagine what those conversations in the residence must have been like. You know, the kind of casual dinner table talk where normal families discuss work drama, except in this case, it's, hey, honey, I think I'm going to designate this political group as terrorists without following any of the legal procedures, or I'm going to fire this prosecutor because he won't investigate my political enemies. Most wives would probably say something like, are you sure that's legal? Or maybe you should run that by your lawyers first. But according to the testimony leak, Melania apparently heard these conversations and documented them. She kept notes, she remembered dates, she preserved evidence. It's like she was building a case file on her own husband. The constitutional implications of this are staggering. We're already in the middle of a third impeachment process, which by itself is historically unprecedented. We've got cabinet members reportedly discussing whether to invoke the 25th Amendment. Federal prosecutors are being pressured to resign for refusing to pursue politically motivated cases. And now we find out that the person closest to the president, the person who shares his bed and his most private moments, has been cooperating with the very investigations that could end his presidency. This isn't just political betrayal. This is personal betrayal on a level that makes Shakespeare look like a Disney movie. But here's what really gets me. This testimony apparently covers specific incidents that directly contradict Trump's public statements. Remember when he said the Antifa designation was based on careful legal review and national security assessments? Well, according to the leak, Melania's testimony suggests those decisions were made impulsively without proper legal consultation and specifically to generate political headlines. She apparently has detailed recollections of conversations where Trump admitted that the terrorist designation was primarily about messaging to his base, not about any genuine security threat. She heard him discuss how the move would play on conservative media, how it would distract from other news stories, how it would energize his supporters. In other words, she can testify that he knowingly used presidential powers designed for national security purposes to achieve domestic political goals. That's not just an impeachable offense, that's potentially criminal. And it gets worse. The testimony apparently includes details about the pressure campaign against federal prosecutors, including specific conversations where Trump discussed using the Justice Department to investigate his political opponents. Not hypothetical discussions about general policy, but detailed planning sessions about targeting specific individuals for political purposes. According to the leak, Melania was present when Trump expressed frustration that prosecutors weren't loyal enough, when he discussed ways to pressure them into pursuing cases against his enemies, when he talked about using his presidential powers to punish people who opposed him politically. She heard him say things that no president should ever say, and now she's sharing those conversations with investigators. I can't even imagine what the atmosphere in that marriage must be like right now. I mean, my wife gets mad at me when I forget to take out the trash. I can't imagine how she'd react if she found out I'd been secretly cooperating with federal investigators building a case against her. Actually, knowing my wife, she'd probably help them build a better case. But seriously, this represents a complete breakdown of the most fundamental relationship in Trump's life. If he can't trust his own wife, if the person who's supposed to be his closest confidant is actively working against him, then his entire support system has collapsed. And that collapse is spreading throughout his entire operation. According to my sources, the Melania testimony leak has triggered panic throughout the administration. Cabinet members who were already nervous about their association with Trump are now openly discussing exit strategies. Republican lawmakers who were reluctantly supporting him are suddenly finding reasons to distance themselves. Everyone's doing the political equivalent of backing away slowly from the crazy person at the party. The really devastating part is that this isn't some external attack that Trump can blame on his enemies. This isn't the deep state or fake news or any of the other convenient scapegoats he usually relies on. This is his own wife sharing information that she obtained through the most intimate relationship in his life. How do you spin that? How do you claim that your own spouse is part of some vast conspiracy against you? How do you maintain any credibility when the person who knows you better than anyone else in the world is actively helping to build the case for your removal from office? The answer is you can't. This is the kind of betrayal that doesn't just end political careers, it destroys them completely. From a strategic standpoint, this testimony solves the biggest problem Trump's opponents have always faced: proving intent. When your spouse testifies about private conversations where you explicitly discussed breaking laws for personal gain, that intent problem disappears. You can't claim ignorance when your wife heard you planning it over dinner. The legal implications are enormous. We're not just talking about impeachment. We're talking about potential criminal charges. The Melania testimony creates what lawyers call a cooperating witness, someone with inside knowledge willing to testify against their former associates. And this is the ultimate cooperating witness, someone who had access to information no one else could possibly obtain. But beyond the legal implications, this represents a complete moral collapse of Trump's presidency. When your own family members start cooperating with investigations into your conduct, when the people closest to you conclude that loyalty to the country is more important than loyalty to you personally, that's not just a political crisis, that it's a personal reckoning. I keep thinking about what this means for the Republican Party as a whole. They've spent years defending Trump, making excuses for his behavior, arguing that his actions were either legal or justified or misunderstood. How do they maintain those defenses when his own wife is providing evidence that contradicts everything they've been saying? The cognitive dissonance is going to be incredible. Are they going to argue that Melania Trump is lying about her own husband? Are they going to claim she's part of some deep state conspiracy? Are they going to suggest that she's been compromised by the investigators? None of those arguments are going to work with the American public. When a wife testifies against her husband in a criminal case, people tend to believe her because they understand that it takes extraordinary circumstances to overcome the most fundamental loyalty in someone's life. And that's exactly what we're dealing with here. Extraordinary circumstances that have forced Melania Trump to choose between her marriage and her country, and she chose her country. The political ramifications are going to be swift and severe. Republican lawmakers who are already nervous about their association with Trump are going to start jumping ship en masse. Corporate donors who were reluctant to continue supporting him are going to find other candidates to back. Conservative media personalities who are defending him are going to start hedging their bets. Everyone's going to want to distance themselves from this disaster before it gets any worse. And it's definitely going to get worse. Once one family member starts cooperating, others often follow. If Melania is talking, what about Donald Jr.? What about Eric? What about Ivanka? How many family conversations are there that could potentially be subpoenaed or voluntarily disclosed? The Trump family has always presented itself as this unified front, this tight-knit clan that would never betray each other. But when criminal liability starts becoming real, when people start facing the possibility of prison time, family loyalty has a way of breaking down pretty quickly. We could be looking at a complete unraveling of the entire Trump operation, with family members competing to provide the most damaging information in exchange for immunity or reduced sentences. From a constitutional standpoint, this testimony could provide the smoking gun that impeachment investigators have been looking for. Up until now, they've had to rely on publicly available information, congressional testimony from officials who might have political motivations, and documentary evidence that Trump's lawyers have fought hard to keep secret. But Melania's testimony provides something completely different. firsthand accounts of private conversations where criminal intent was explicitly discussed. That's the kind of evidence that changes everything, because it eliminates any possibility of claiming that Trump's actions were innocent mistakes or misunderstandings. When your wife testifies that you told her you were knowingly breaking the law, there's no defense strategy that can overcome that. The 25th Amendment discussions that were already happening in the cabinet are probably going to accelerate now. When cabinet members realize that the president's own spouse is providing evidence of his unfitness for office, it becomes much easier to justify taking action to remove him. And unlike impeachment, which requires a 2/3 majority in the Senate, the 25th Amendment only requires a majority of the cabinet and the vice president. If enough cabinet members decide that Trump's continued presidency represents a threat to national security, and Melania's testimony certainly suggests that it does, they have the power to act immediately. We could be looking at a constitutional crisis unlike anything in American history, where a president is simultaneously facing impeachment by Congress, potential removal by his own cabinet, and criminal prosecution based on testimony from his own wife. It's like a perfect storm of political and personal destruction, all centered around one man who apparently couldn't resist discussing his criminal plans with the person who was closest to him. The irony is almost too much to bear. Trump built his entire political brand around the idea of loyalty, constantly demanding that people prove their devotion to him, punishing anyone who showed even the slightest hint of disloyalty. And in the end, it was his demand for absolute loyalty that destroyed him, because it prevented him from recognizing that even his own wife might eventually choose principle over personal loyalty. Melania's testimony doesn't just change the legal landscape, it changes our entire understanding of the Trump presidency. It suggests that many of the most controversial actions of his administration weren't the result of incompetence or misunderstanding, but of deliberate criminal intent. And that realization is going to force a complete reevaluation of everything that's happened over the past few years. Every policy decision, every personnel change, every public statement is going to be reexamined in light of this new evidence of criminal intent. The American people deserve to know the truth about what their president was doing in private, what his real motivations were, what his actual plans were. And thanks to Melania's courage in coming forward, they're finally going to get that truth, even if it destroys a marriage, a presidency, and potentially an entire political party in the process. Because sometimes the truth is more important than loyalty. Sometimes doing the right thing requires betraying the people closest to you. And sometimes the most patriotic thing you can do is tell the truth about the person you love, even when that truth is devastating. Melania Trump just made that choice. And in doing so, she may have saved American democracy from a president who was willing to destroy it for his own personal gain. Her testimony changes everything, and there's no going back.